All right, good evening. Thank you. And it's great to see a lot of friendly faces here coming out. I understand it's the first day back after school vacation week, and it's tough getting into that routine, but we're really grateful to have you here, and we're also grateful to have a really strong community member panel that we're going to present to you. We have District Attorney Balaji here tonight with us. District Attorney Balaji is the District Attorney and Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Essex County. So we are very privileged to have him here tonight with us. And we'd like to share with you this content, this presentation that has been put together through the Addiction Policy Forum out of Bethesda, Maryland. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce DA Balaji to come and say hello and say a few words.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. This is meant to be an informational setting, information for parents and for students to hopefully learn what the science researchers taught us. As Officer Brendan Reed had said, Addiction Policy Forum out of Bethesda, Maryland, I'm very honored to be the chairman of Addiction Policy Forum. I succeeded General Barry McCaffrey as the chairperson. If you know about him, you know he's a bona fide American hero. And the whole purpose of the Addiction Policy Forum, and you'll see the slides that were just mentioned. Officer Wilson's going to help us in that regard. But what you're going to see tonight is a short presentation, short slides, and videos that were 18 months in the making with researchers, scientific research, scientists, to put together something that wouldn't be scientific legally speak. It would be language that people can understand, but it's very, very important, I would suggest to you. So it's informational. I want to thank Dr. Angelakis. Pam has been a great partner in my office, as does the Swampscott Police, to just, again, provide information. One thing that we've learned over the recent past is that the human organs develop at a much slower rate than you would realize. The last organ that fully develops is the human brain. There's been research, there have been scientific treatises about at what point does the brain fully develop. There are some scientists who say that the female brain develops faster than the male brain, and I can say that's true, having 2 sons and a daughter. The female brain definitely develops sooner than the male brain. But be that as it may, the whole idea is to help give information that will slow down the onset of substance use disorders, to slow down, hopefully, kids will experiment, we know that, but slow down the use of substance uses, alcohol and drugs, so that the human brain can develop. Science will show, and you'll see this in a moment, that if you can stop the onset of alcohol and drug use in minors before 18, their chances of not developing a substance disorder rises precipitously. And those who do use alcohol and drugs before they're 18 on a regular basis have an over 50% chance of developing a substance use disorder as adults. So again, this is informational. No one is trying to be hard about this. This is just what you're going to see is born from many years of research and many years of use and experimental development by scientists. When this is done, after the presentation, I will stay here, answer any questions you have. I have 2 staff members with me who've been involved heavily. And what we do in my office is try to provide information and try to provide information that you can use so that people make good decisions. Years ago, I was in this auditorium talking about the dangers of underage drinking, social host liability with Attorney Richard Campbell. We talked about the civil liability of that, and I talked about the potential criminal liability. It's something that we feel strongly about. We have juvenile diversion in my office, we have youthful diversion, and we created a drug diversion program in 2007. Over 1,400 people have gone through the program and successfully completed it in lieu of prosecution. We have brochures up here. Please feel free to grab something to learn about our drug diversion program and also the social host liability. Again, thank you so much for being here. And again, I will stick around for a while afterwards and answer any questions you have. Thank you so much. And with that, Officer Wilson.
So Officer Wilson we're going to gear up this slideshow for us, and at some point every slide or so, there'll be a link where we'll show a video which will last for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes or so. But as that's being said, I just want to briefly share with what we're doing in Swampscott. Swampscott Fire Chief is here tonight, Chief Archer, and we respond to calls for service. Many times we respond to overdoses. And even in a 3 square mile town like Swampscott, the numbers are alarming. Since I've been tracking these numbers as our department has, since 2015, we've had 108 total overdoses in town. I will say though that with the advent of Narcan and our quick response times, we had 13 overdoses last year alone. Every one of them was a save. We didn't have one fatality. So I am proud of that, but I still am sensitive to the fact that I do know of one. There was a Swampscott resident that died in another town. So you know, this is a situation, and this is a problem, a health problem that we are impacted. No matter what your border is, no matter where you're from, no matter what your education level is, no matter how much money you make, it could affect anyone at any time, and we need to be sensitive to that. So the goal of this from the parental standpoint is to learn how to engage with our children, learn how to have that conversation, and to be open-minded about it. So with that, I'm ready to kick it up.
I'm sorry, I forgot the most important part. Can you give me a brief overview of the 3 slides you're going to see? The first is Protect Your Brain. Addiction Policy Forum created this campaign in partnership with the United States Drug Enforcement Administration's Education Foundation and the Essex County District Attorney's Office. It's narrated by a high school student. Protect Your Brain is an awareness campaign made specifically for teens and adolescents on how to protect themselves from addiction. Next is the Opioid Prevention Campaign. That slide is about the public health and media campaign created to help parents, teachers, and teens understand the importance of prevention, especially while the adolescent brain is still developing. And finally, you'll hear about Addiction Policy Forum's Vaping, Know the Facts campaign. The campaign boils down the latest science into a free, open-source toolkit that explains the harms associated with adolescent vaping. It gives audiences the tools they need to take action. Thank you.
So protect your brain. Oh, that's a little wild, sorry. As D.A. Blodgett said, we're going to start off with this first segment. Thank you, Mr. Gillette. So between the ages of 10 and 19, the brain, as we've already mentioned, is changing rapidly. It's extremely important to protect our brain, as we've learned it is the last organ to fully develop. And in this video, we share 4 strategies that we can use to protect the brain and stay safe from substance use disorders.
Protect your brain. The adolescent years, roughly ages 10 through 19, are marked by dynamic brain changes. During this time, teens have more synapses than adults, so we learn faster. Neuroscientists call this synaptic plasticity. An important aspect of a maturing brain is the development of connections or networks that link different parts of the brain. It takes 2.5 decades to hook up each of the parts of the brain to each other, like slowly building and linking the parts of a force field over 25 years. Before the force field is in place, teens can get addicted harder, stronger, faster, longer than adults. But neuroscience can teach us ways to reduce risks and help teens navigate this strange time. 4 things you can do to protect your brain include: number 1, delay using alcohol or any substances. While the force field is building, the teenage brain is impressionable to both good and bad things, so limit the bad and increase the good. Number 2, build positive coping skills. Find healthy ways to deal with life and stress, whether that's exercise, counseling, mindfulness, or painting. Number 3, get plenty of sleep. Teens need 9 to 10 hours of sleep each night. Number 4, if you have addiction in your family, you're at an even higher risk and need to take extra precautions. Remember, the brain is the last organ to fully develop, so be smart, protect your brain.
So the research we have shows that 90% of people with substance use disorder began using drugs and alcohol before the age of 18. What is key to this is preventing the onset of the substance use disorder by delaying the age of first use. We can stretch that out longer, as we talked about, the odds go up.
Age matters. The adolescent brain is way more vulnerable to drugs and alcohol than in adults. The earlier someone starts using substances, the greater their chances of developing an addiction are. 90% of people with a substance use disorder began using drugs and alcohol before the age of 18. 90%. So what does this mean? Age matters. Prevention is about delaying the onset of first use, pushing it back as long as possible, whether that's alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana, which are the most commonly used substances by teens. Early use of alcohol or drugs can greatly harm brain development and increases the risk of developing an addiction later in life. Protecting the brain during this time is vital, as the adolescent brain is rapidly developing, learning and changing all the time. The adolescent brain can learn a new language or an instrument much quicker than adults can. It can also be damaged way more easily than an adult's can. The brain continues to develop until a person is in their early to mid-20s, but the regions of the brain that control emotions and impulse control won't the last to develop. So be smart. Protect your brain.
We often hear that addiction may run in families, and it's been shown that genetics do account for 50% of a person's likelihood of developing substance use disorder. In this next video, we're going to learn that adolescents will learn how to mind their genes to avoid developing an addiction.
Mind your genes. Genes are the functional unit of our DNA that direct the development of every cell in our bodies. Some diseases, such as sickle cell anemia or cystic fibrosis, are caused by mutations in a single gene. But many diseases, such as cancer, heart disease, and substance use disorder, involve variations in many different genes. We often hear that addiction can run in families. Research suggests that genetics account for 50% of a person's likelihood of developing an addiction. But the risks of developing a substance use disorder is also influenced by lifestyle and individual choices. Information is power. Knowing about a family history of addiction empowers us to make different decisions about using substances. So if addiction runs in your family, will you struggle too? Scientists have discovered that it's the interaction of your genes and experiences that affect your health. Your environmental exposure and the choices you make can change how your genes are expressed, meaning which genes are switched on or off. This is called epigenetics, the study of how behavior and choices affect the way your genes work. Epi means above or in addition to. While you can't change your genes, you can change which genes are switched on and off, and how they affect your health. Even with a family history of addiction, you can reduce your risk of developing a substance use disorder by doing things to keep the addiction switch turned off, like delaying substance use until your brain is mature in your 20s, learning skills to help you cope with stress, and express emotions in healthy ways, even limiting alcohol use throughout your lifetime to stay healthy. So be smart. Protect your brain.
The Opioid Prevention Campaign is a public health media campaign to help prevent adolescent substance use. This features key information about opioids and guidance for parents and teachers on how to prevent opioid misuse. This evidence-based toolkit translates the science of addiction and provides critical prevention information on prevention. This barcode, if you wish, and just to an aside, if you want to reach out to us, I can provide you with this link or this presentation, and you can access, or even access on the website of Addiction Policy Forum. So this opioid campaign has some components. These PSAs here are going to show us 12 things that parents can do to prevent addiction, 7 things that teachers can do to prevent addiction, and I'll also share an idea about teens and opioids.
The alarming increase in opioid overdose deaths has created a national crisis. Opioids are one of the most commonly misused drugs in the country, and they're among the most addictive drugs. Teens have added health risks when it comes to opioids. You may have heard people talk about opioids and not even realize it. Oxy, Percs, and Vicks are all slang terms for opioids. And then there's fentanyl. Fentanyl is an opioid drug that is 50 times more powerful than heroin. It's frequently mixed with other drugs, leading to overdose, which is caused when you take enough of the drug to stop breathing. Opioid use can affect every area of your life, from poor grades, to poor performance in sports, to hurting your relationships with friends and family. For teenagers, it can more easily harm your brain and cause addiction than in adults. To explain, we asked the country's top doctor on addiction, Dr. Nora Volkov.
The teenage years are probably some of the most important as it relates to brain development and building up experiences, including learning and preparing in order to be able to transition into adulthood. And that we do know that drugs are actually unfortunately disrupting the neuroarchitecture of the brain in a way that can jeopardize not just your cognitive abilities, but your emotions and and ultimately your likelihood of succeeding, including the risk of becoming addicted. So when you take drugs as an adolescent, your vulnerability for addiction is much greater.
What can you do to protect yourself? To protect your brain, number one, don't use opioids for fun, and only take opioids as prescribed by your doctor. Even then, take them for as short a time as possible. Number two, advocate for your own health. If your doctor or dentist prescribes opioids for a painful condition, ask them how quickly you can stop taking them, or if there are other medications to use instead. Number three, delay use of all substances. Alcohol use, nicotine, and drug use are more damaging to the teenage brain, which doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. Be smart. Protect your brain. For more information, visit www.addictionpolicy.org. 7 things teachers can do to prevent addiction. We know the safety of your students is important to you. You are their teacher, teaching them new subjects, critical thinking, and new skills every day. With the current opioid crisis in America, keeping your students safe from the disease of addiction is also important. For teenagers, drug and alcohol use can more easily harm the brain and cause an addiction than in adults. Here are 7 things teachers can do to protect teens from addiction. Number 1, talk to your students. Have a conversation with your class about the risks of using alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. Drug and alcohol use have cognitive effects that will affect your students' academic performance and overall health. Number 2, set clear expectations of no use. Be clear with your class that you expect them not to use alcohol or drugs. You are an important person in their lives. Teaching them each day and speaking up on this topic matters. Make it part of your expectations for your entire class. Homework, studying, preparation for class, proper sleep, and avoidance of alcohol and drugs. Number 3, practice refusal skills. Practice key messaging that your students can use in risky situations, such as, "No, I'm the designated driver." "No, I have a big test tomorrow." Or, "No, my parents are strict about that stuff." Number 4, establish clear consequences. Be clear about your school's immediate consequences of alcohol and drug use. Number 5, make sleep a priority. Talk to your students about getting the proper amount of sleep. Sleep is critical for mental and physical health, especially during adolescence, when brains are developing rapidly. Number 6, intervene early. If you think that a student may be struggling with substance use, don't wait to intervene. Science tells us that the earlier a person is treated for a substance use disorder, the better their outcomes. Number 7, educate yourself about addiction. Understanding addiction will help you talk about the issue with your students and answer questions. Teachers play an important role in the lives of teens. These 7 strategies will help keep them safe and healthy. For more information, visit www.addictionpolicy.org. 12 things parents can do to prevent addiction. It's our job to protect our kids and keep them safe. We hold them close as they get their first shots, teach them to look both ways before crossing the street, and help them develop healthy habits. We know that keeping children safe from addiction is also a high priority. Here are 12 things parents can do to protect teens from addiction. Number 1, talk early and often. Children whose parents talk to them about the risks of drugs and alcohol use are 50% less likely to use substances. It's important for teens to delay substance use until their brain is fully developed. The adolescent brain doesn't fully develop until age 22 for girls and 25 for boys. It can develop an addiction more quickly during this time and be damaged more easily than the adult brain. 90% of people with an addiction began using before the age of 18. If your family has a history of addiction, you can discuss this with your child. Stress the need to be more cautious. A genetic predisposition can make a person more susceptible to addiction, especially if use begins early. Number 2, support healthy activities. 2 of the key factors that reduce the risk of kids developing addictions are healthy attachment and pro-social engagement, which means feeling like you belong and being engaged in positive activities, whether it's sports, music, drama, volunteering, or STEM. Kids do better when they are kept busy and feel part of a healthy community. Number 3, set clear expectations. Be clear with your child that you expect them not to use alcohol or drugs. More than 80% of kids say their parents are the biggest influence on their decision to drink or not drink alcohol. Number 4, practice refusal skills. Practice key messaging that your child can use in risky situations, such as, "No, I'm the designated driver." "No, I have a big game tomorrow." Or, "No, my mom is strict about that stuff." Number 5, establish clear consequences. Be clear and consistent about the immediate consequences of alcohol and drug use in your family. Number 6, it's not your job to be cool. It's tempting to want to be friends with our kids, but what they need most is a parent to guide them safely into adulthood by setting clear expectations and holding them accountable. Number 7, do not provide alcohol or drugs to your teens. It's understandable to think that kids would be safer doing something if we were there to monitor them, but this doesn't extend to substance use. Parents can donate or supply alcohol to their teens, sometimes referred to as social hosting, increases adolescent alcohol usage, as well as other unsafe behaviors. Number 8, pay close attention. It can seem like kids need us less as they grow up, but staying engaged throughout the adolescent years is critically important. Build relationships with other parents in your community. Work with them to keep tabs on where teens are gathering and what they're doing. Number 9, carve out family time. Research shows that spending time with family, bonding over favorite activities, or talking about your days has a long-lasting positive impact and strengthens healthy attachment, even if your teen claims they would rather be doing anything else. Number 10, make sleep a priority. Sleep is critical for mental and physical health, especially during adolescence when brains are developing rapidly. Number 11, help your teen with an escape plan. Setting up an escape plan can help your teen exit difficult situations. Decide on a secret code that they can text a parent or caregiver to be immediately picked up and exit the situation. Choose a code word or emoji that signifies they need help with an exit. It can be anything, an emoji, symbol, or a single word or letter, like exit or X. Number 12, intervene early. If you think that your teen may be struggling with substance use, don't wait to intervene. Science tells us that the earlier a person is treated for a substance use disorder, the better their outcomes. Parents and caregivers can use these evidence-based strategies to promote healthy development and prevent addiction. For more information, visit addictionpolicy.org.
So the campaign components, these are one-page publications, 12 things parents can do workbook, addiction in the brain one-pager, how addiction hijacks the brain infographic, teens and opioid one-pager, and how to practice refusal skills. all available on this website, Addiction Policy Forum as well. The social media graphics as well that cover general opioid facts, topics for parents, and topics for teachers as well. Vaping. See it more and more now, more so than ever. It's readily available. People think of it as an alternative to smoking. Now there are abilities to get these types of vaping cartridges with THC in them. So we need to know some facts about this. And this boils down to essentially the latest science into a free open source toolkit. Again, another barcode is available that explains the harms associated with adolescent vaping and empowers audiences with the tools to take action. Again, this is geared towards parents primarily, teachers, school administrators, and of course our teenagers. This next video will discuss the impact vaping has on the brain. As you can tell, the general theme is our brain is affected. It's affected in so many ways, and it's developing later. So this is another key component that this video will explain what science does, and what it says about e-cigarette use and how it affects our adolescents.
E-cigarettes, or vapes, are battery-operated devices that produce vapor instead of smoke. And instead of being packed with tobacco, they have cartridges filled with a liquid that contains flavorings and nicotine. Vapes haven't gone through a health and safety review yet, but that hasn't stopped vape companies from making all sorts of unfounded claims and tempting you to try them. Meanwhile, the science is in. Researchers have found harmful ingredients in vapes, including ultrafine particles that can damage the lungs, oils and flavorings that are linked to serious lung disease, volatile organic compounds like benzene, which is found in car exhaust, and poisonous metals like nickel, tin, and lead. And then there's nicotine, which is extremely addictive and especially bad for young people because of the way the brain works. Our brains grow rapidly until we reach our mid-20s. And using nicotine while it's still developing can disturb this process and increase our risk for addiction and mental health issues later in life. This is because nicotine affects synapse formation in the parts of the brain that control attention and learning, which can lead to memory issues, mood disorders, and lower impulse control permanently. Kids who use nicotine in middle and high school are more likely to use cigarettes and other drugs in the future. Young people who vape are 4 times more likely to go on to smoke cigarettes than those who don't. And juuling delivers way more nicotine than smoking. A single Juul pod is equivalent to 20 cigarettes, which makes all of these risks even more dramatic. It could take years before we fully understand how vaping affects our health. It took 120 years for researchers to show how dangerous cigarettes are. But what experts already know should stop us in our tracks. Get ahead of history. Protect your brain.
And again, some more resources, the barcodes. This is all on the Addiction Policy Forum website, but I can also email it to anyone that is interested as well. So that's the presentation part of it. Next, we want to invite our panel members to come up. We have some community members from town that I think really offer a good example of people who have been impacted by substance use disorders and people who are helping to fight for those people with substance use disorders. So if I could invite those folks, we have just a brief introduction for our people once we get up to the panel here. You could make your way. And again, I want to re-emphasize to you all that this is an open community forum. There is no judgment here. And I was talking to my friend Chris earlier. You know, the stigma associated with substance use disorders from years ago when I was some of your ages was don't talk about it. And I think that has been reduced, and we want to talk about it because we in fact need to talk about it. So I'm proud to have some friends here in our community, and I'll briefly introduce from left to right. On the left is Amanda Rivers. She's our Swampscott High School nurse. Next is Chris DePietro. Chris is a Swampscott firefighter. He has a very unique experience, unique story, because he is a first responder like us. We do respond to these types of calls, and he has a unique story to tell as well about his own brother and his own situation. Antonio Gutierrez, one of the greatest faces you will see at Lynn District Court when you go in to Lynn District Court is seeing Antonio. Antonio is a Lynn Youth Street outreach advocate. We will not punish him for wearing a Yankees hat tonight, but we'll look past it and we won't put any, Antonio's story is especially helpful. James Nicholson is a Swampscott resident. He's also a family nurse practitioner at Lynn Community Health Center. He's part of the complex addiction team, and he'll be able to explain to you some of his efforts in the community. Next is Billy C. Billy grew up in Swampscott, neighbor of mine, and struggled with opioid and prescription addiction, substance use disorders. And as you can see, he's in long-term recovery and is doing fantastic. He just became a dad, and he lives up in Maine and made the trip down tonight to share his story with all of us. And of course, his mom, a good friend, Catherine C. She's an employee here at the high school. Catherine offers a super unique perspective from the parental side of things, and the wake-up call, and the scared, that scared feeling that you have with your child when you feel utterly helpless and you don't know where to turn and what to do. Well, now I reach out to Catherine when I have a family that is overdosed and their parents need to maybe go to a support group. We now have a support group for parents that are struggling with those with substance use disorders, and how great is that? So we're trying to really erase this whole stigma thing. And now I turn it to you. I ask of you, let's begin some type of dialogue. Is there a Q&A? Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? I will bring this microphone to you, or we can do whatever it is. But we can do that. If anyone has a question, if not, or if anyone wants to start with their story and at least offer a little bit. Chris, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind.
So I wrote down my story as well as an incident that occurred. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris DePietro, and I lost my brother to an overdose of drugs and alcohol on February 16, 2016, the day before his birthday. What can I say about my brother Ryan, other than a normal upbringing? He enjoyed sports, music, comic books, hanging out with friends, and loved his family. At some point, it took a wrong turn that led him down a path to destruction and ultimately his death. As we stand in front of you tonight, speaking about drug and alcohol addiction and the disastrous effects it can have on someone's life. However, many people don't realize the effects it has on families as well. The fighting, the arguing, yelling, countless sleepless nights my mother and father had to go through waiting for him to come home. The message I want to give tonight is that if you suspect your loved one is suffering from addiction, especially involving opioids, don't be afraid to seek help. The regret and guilt far exceed any shame or embarrassment one could ever endure in the process of speaking up, getting help for that person who needs it the most. I remember that day I found my brother in the fatal overdose, February 16, 2016. I told my parents a week earlier to go on a yearly vacation. I said I'll look after him. So they went, trusting me that everything would be all right. That day, me, my wife, and my son went to go see Ryan and my mom and dad's house. As we entered the house, I could smell a faint odor. Based on my training experience as a firefighter, I couldn't explain what it was. I yelled out, "Ryan, home." There was no answer. My wife told her, she said, "Go look upstairs." So I looked at his bedroom, he was not there. I then proceeded to the TV room, where I saw him on the floor. Immediately my training kicked in, I started CPR, knowing that he was more than likely dead for a few hours. I called my 911 dispatch, and first responders arrived within minutes. But in my mind, it seemed like it was hours. And go on and on about that day. What could I have done different? If I only checked on him sooner, I could have saved him. In the end, I can only say that maybe it was just his time, and that he was with God. I'd also like to think that he was with Grandma, cooking meatballs, stirring gravy, as we once loved to do as kids. Thank you. I'm just going to say just a few things about, being a family member and stuff is that don't be ashamed to come out and say, I have a family member that's addicted, that has issues, that has mental health problems. Fire and police, we're here to help. Seek us out. Get the help for them that they need. Again, the guilt that I carry for not reaching out earlier is something I'm going to carry on for the rest of my life. The embarrassment, the shame, however they are, and what stage of addiction they're in, is irrelevant. Their family should always be with them.
Chris, thank you. Antonio.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Antonio Gutierrez. I'm the co-founder of the Lakeview Street Outreach Advocacy Program. I'm also in recovery. In August, I'll have 23 years clean. I'm also, I still do meetings 3 times a week. My addiction started at 12. It ended at the age of 35, homeless in Boston. I was shooting heroin. Through the midst of my addiction, my mother fell ill. I went to see my mother at the hospital. I shot a bag of dope before I went to see my mother. My mother died in my lap, and I didn't even know she had passed away. Throughout the addiction, I went to see my father. He had a massive stroke, and I watched my father die as I smoked crack in the bathroom in the hospital. My family, my brother's a police officer, my older brother. He's a New York City detective now. Before all this, I come from both aspects of this. I was a gang member, I was a drug dealer. Back home in New York, that's a Yankee hat, they're bad for. So my upbringing, so I thought was that. That's exactly what I did, what I see. So I created my own world, and I destroyed many homes. So the disease of addiction did exactly what it was supposed to do to me. My family had no idea what to do with me. I thought homeless was okay. I lived for many years, and I'll tell you, I'm a father of 9, grandfather of 16. I was a single father in this process. While I lived in Lynn, while I continued to do this work, I raised 3 kids as a single father. And I've been fortunate for the last almost 15 years to be able to do this work along with Mr. Blanchard's office in the district court and juvenile court and stuff. And being able to work with the young people and trying to help. Along with that, I'm also part of the drug court team at the district court. I've also worked in the recovery field, right? I see what this disease does to our young people. They think they are invincible. I've watched 15 and 16-year-old kids, and I say kids that are out there now, homeless, running around the streets. We're trying to get these kids off the streets that are actually, it's not even heroin, fentanyl. I can't even tell you how many young people I have Narcan, right? I carry it on me daily, right? And like the gentleman to my side said, like, if you have a family member, listen, conversations, don't be afraid to start them. Every young person that comes through my door at my drop-in center in Lynn, right, I open my dialogue right away, right? Like, what's going on at home? Do you have this going on? And they look at me like, listen, it's a hard conversation to have, but it needs to be done, right? And so, when I got invited to this, I was excited, right? Not only am I on this side of the line now, but I've been fortunate, right, to be able to give back. I can't right all the wrong that I did back then, but at least I'm doing my part to help and try to make things just a little bit better for some of the families. Thank you.
So first I want to say thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you for putting this on. It's really important. Thank you for sharing your stories. I know that can be really tough for a lot of people. I am a family nurse practitioner, so I see babies to the elderly, but I deal mainly with so the complex addictions team. So usually it's people who are ready to seek treatment, who are already in the throes of addiction. And unfortunately, I've only seen a few teenagers, well not unfortunately, but I guess, a couple of 17, 18-year-olds. So it's hard to get that foot in the door, to take that first step. There's a lot of shame and stigma in addiction, and there's even more, if you're a teenager. It's really hard to admit that you're struggling. It's easy to feel like you're alone when you're a teenager. All the adults here were once teenagers. So, I wouldn't say that we understand you, because nobody understands you. But as a teenager, you're going through a lot of stress and changes, and learning those coping skills is really important, and it's easy to fall on substances as a crutch, and it's the worst time in your life to do that. So, unfortunately, when somebody is struggling, they isolate themselves in a lot of cases, don't seek treatment, and then, I saw the statistic up here in the presentation that about 90% of people with substance use disorders start in their early years, in their teenage years. And that's fairly accurate based on people I see in the clinic. About 90%, started early on with substances. And, that can be really challenging. If families don't listen to them, they can become more isolated, and connection is one of the primary important things for somebody to not spiral into a negative feedback loop. So parents making sure you're supporting, listening to your kids, and not isolating. The people that I see who are struggling the worst have totally been cut off from family and have virtually no support. So, there's always going to be struggles in recovery. So sticking with people when they're struggling is most important.
Thank you, James.
So my name is Billy. Grew up in Swampscott. I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. My sober date is August 17th of 2012. So hopefully next year. Sitting up here, I see a lot of younger kids in the crowd tonight, which I commend you all for coming, because I too once sat where you guys are sitting, and I remember listening to these panels or listening to people speak and saying, I'm not like you, I'm not like those people, I'll never need their help, I don't know why I'm here, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. I started using that at 13 years old. I personally don't think I ever had a chance. I think the genetics from my family is what did it. If we're looking for a scientific reason, when I look at the first time I drank, and two of my friends and I stole a bottle of vodka from their friend's father, and we each took 2 shots, and they all said, let's put it away, and I kept saying, let's just do one more, and they didn't want to do it, right? They kept saying no, to the point where I actually made them pour me another shot before they put it away, and the other 2 guys I was with didn't end up taking that shot. So for me personally, I remember that now. When I was 13 years old, I didn't think it was a big deal at all. But when I look back on it, I don't think I ever really had much of a chance. And I guess sitting up here, if I can say anything to the young people sitting in the crowd, there was a lot of warning signs along the way for me, right? There was counselors I saw. My parents picked on it pretty quickly that, maybe I had something going on that told me I was a drug addict or an alcoholic, and I always told them, no, you're wrong. If people are telling you that, they're not just telling you that to harass you. I always thought they were just giving me a hard time. They were telling me that for a reason. and they were right. And if it can slow it down, my life got to a point where I didn't want to live anymore. I ended up homeless and in different states because I would leave rehabs. My life looked horrible, and it all started from drinking alcohol and smoking weed. And then it led to opiates eventually. But you know, I didn't think weed was a drug. I didn't think my drinking was a problem, honestly, because I was so bad at it. Because every time I drank, I became belligerently drunk, that I never did much. But smoking weed was really what led me to opiates, and then my opiate use led me to homelessness, doing things I said I would never do before. And that's where when it really got ugly mentally. But luckily, my mother always stood by me. I'm grateful and lucky that I had a family that was able to do that. Without them, I would not be sitting up here. I can say that with 100% fact. But I essentially got introduced to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and through that, I was able to get better. It wasn't until I sat down with another drug addict or alcoholic that it really clicked for me. Someone who had been in my shoes was really, really important for me to be able to relate to. Because like I said, I've been to these counselors and therapists, and I could tell they were just reading out of a book. But when I sat down with another drug addict or alcoholic, I couldn't lie to that person, and I knew that person had been where I had been, and working together, I was able to recover from the disease of addiction to the point now where I love my life. I love everything about my life. I just I have 2 kids now under the age of 2, so I'm pretty busy. But my life has changed significantly through that. And it goes back to I always had that insecurity feeling. I used drugs for that, but now with AA and the 12 steps and everything like that, I'm able to be happy living a sober life. So.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and I'm Billy's mom. And I agree, it's great to see a large crowd here. Back when Billy was sick, nothing like this was happening. And there wasn't any support for parents as well, so it's wonderful to see all the parents here and the kids as well. I do think Billy is right that he didn't have much of a chance. I came from a family where there was a lot of addiction. It was alcohol addiction, and my husband did as well. And when Billy was born and his sister was born, my husband and I used to talk about how we were going to control this. We thought, if we were on top of everything, that we would be able to control what Bill does. And I really didn't know about the disease of addiction. I just thought we would, just be on the spot and always be able to take care of him. And that didn't work. And Billy's addiction got really, really bad. There were a lot of times when I thought I was going to lose him, and I thought, that I was going to have to bury him. And that didn't happen, thank God. But we tried to always, I came from a very nice family. I came from people that abused alcohol, but you really would like my family. They were really nice people. And I feel that we were a nice family, the 4 of us. My husband and I tried to be on top of everything at all times. I was listening to the earlier, they were talking about, keeping everybody busy. My children were busy. They played a sport every season. We skied every weekend from Thanksgiving to Easter. The 4 of us as a family unit. We were always together. My husband and I all made a pact that we would never overindulge with alcohol, and we didn't want to see our children see us lose control in any way. So Phil and I spoke a lot about addiction before, when the kids were little. And again, I thought I was going to be able to control this. I didn't realize that it was a disease that I wasn't going to be able to take care of. I didn't realize Billy was struggling as much in high school as he felt like he was. I really noticed more of the struggle in college. That's when I started realizing he was really struggling and having a problem. I think it was junior year that I got really scared and I thought he was gonna die in some college dorm. So I said I wanted him to come home, and he came home without, I think he wanted to come home as well. I think he was scared. And he was at home with us for 2 years, and it was really, really difficult. I couldn't understand how we had gotten to this point when we had tried so hard to stay away from any sort of addiction. And he did a number of rehab stints, and he finally did find one that stuck for him, as he just said. And during that time, there wasn't a lot of support for parents. The only thing at the very beginning, this was right at the beginning of the opiate crisis, so I went to Al-Anon, which was really a program for yourself, and it was helpful, but what my husband and I were looking for was somebody to tell us how to fix Billy. And there was nobody there that could tell us how to fix Billy. And so I started with Al-Anon, and then there was a program in Salem that was called Learn to Cope, and that was run by other parents who had children that were having addiction issues. So I went to Learn to Cope for a while, but the program that worked best for me was a program called the Family Restored, and there weren't many. Now there are. Now it's all in New England, I think, right? There's a Family Restored program all in New England, and that program is run by addicts in recovery. And it's wonderful to hear them because as a parent, you're going there and you're looking for direction, please help me. And when somebody is abusing drugs or alcohol, they're very manipulative. And this program being run by people who are in recovery, they could tell you straight up, how and what to do, what not to do. I still attend some of the Family Restored meetings. Often, if I have a friend or somebody who is having a child struggle, I can still attend those meetings. They help me every time, even now, and I still go. But it's been a long road, but Billy's got quite a few years of recovery. I'm proud of him, and I'm really grateful for that. And it's grateful to hear about the other people here that are in recovery as well.
Hi, so I'm the high school nurse here, and I think one of the biggest things that I found working with the high schoolers here is, I think, especially with weed now being legal in Massachusetts, kids don't see it as that big of a deal, or the vapes is that big of a deal, and they don't understand why. Sometimes they get in trouble for it or why we care so much. But I'm also a psych nurse. I work at Salem Hospital and I work at the inpatient psych unit. I work everywhere from pediatrics to geriatrics. And one of the biggest things that I think I was surprised when I started working on the pediatric floor, which is 5 to 18, were how many kids had substance use problems. And the one thing that's nice about Salem is that it's a dual diagnosis. So it deals with the mental health aspect and the drug aspect of it too. What I think a lot of people don't realize is with addiction, there's usually mental health and addiction sort of go hand in hand, and a lot of these rehabs that people go to can't or don't deal with the mental health aspect of it also. So for instance, we had on the adult unit a gentleman get admitted, and he was coming from RCA, which is Recovery Centers of Danvers. Of America, it's in Danvers. And I was like, oh, why, if he was already in detox, why is he coming here? They're like, oh, well, he said he was suicidal. And they can't handle that. They don't do the mental health aspect of it. So there are not that many places that are kind of like a dual diagnosis that are gonna handle both of it. On top of that too, especially at the younger ages, like the teenage years and stuff like that, there are so few places that take children for mental health and drugs that they end up waiting in the emergency room for weeks. I remember at one point when I was, looking to see if we were getting any admissions in or whatever, there was a child that was in the emergency room for 2 weeks. They had a 3-week wait for a bed. So now, you have a child that's potentially in crisis. whether the family brought them in or they're coming in to try to get help, now they're in a holding pattern. And they're waiting in the emergency room for, a couple weeks before they can get a bed. And if they're sectioned, which means that they're not safe to be on their own and they're keeping them there, that's awesome. But sometimes after like a week of waiting or something like that, the family might just be like, this isn't working for us. They've been hanging out in the emergency room. We're gonna not do that. So you kind of end up with like this bottleneck effect where even if you have people that are in a position that they want to get help, they can't get help because there just aren't the beds for it. And then afterwards, to kind of, once they're inpatient, it's the same issues where you'll have kids that should go into like a partial program or some sort of program to help with their addiction, but there just aren't any beds. There's such a need for this, and there just aren't places, especially for younger kids, for them to go. And you have the same thing with adults. And unfortunately, like, when you work in the adult unit, you get to know people really well. So I've been in Salem for 2 years, and I would say there's probably like about 20 patients that I know really well because they've had multiple admissions, which, and every time they're like, we send them, whether it's to a rehab or a detox or whatever, once they're medically cleared and we stabilize them and their mental health issues are okay and they're ready to like go take on their addiction. And we always we hope for the best, and this time's gonna be different than last time. Something happens when they get like out of their program, or the program doesn't work for them, or the halfway house doesn't work for them, or the respite doesn't work for them, or they're dealing with homelessness, and they come back. And it kind of turns into this circular pattern again and again and again. And if we can stop it at the younger age so they never get to that point, then you don't have to see that, you don't have to deal with that, because like Lynn Community Center has a program, but you're saying that these are people that want help, and you have to get to the point where people want to get better and they want to succeed, and they can be at a low and say like, yes, I'm going to go and I want to get help, but then as soon as they're feeling better, or they run into one of their friends that they used to use with or something like that, it doesn't take much for that to kind of trigger them and for the desire and the temptation to go there. So it really is important to kind of start having these conversations with the kids when they're in middle school, when they're in high school, and they start to, get exposed to it, to sort of stop it, and having like really frank conversations with your kids about what can happen and what is, out there if they do go down this road is really important to stop it before it becomes a problem.
Thank you, Amanda. We've had some good insight from these community members. I open the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, I'll come to you. Mary.
My question is this: as a parent, what is the very first thing you would recommend we do if we suspect even a little that there's some abuse going on? Where do we go first?
James?
At this point, if I would suspect it at all, I would come right out and ask them if they're struggling. I think that would be the first person I would go to, is directly to them. And hopefully you might get them when they might be vulnerable and they'd be more willing to tell you the truth, because a lot of times I don't think I was being told the truth. So actually, maybe you have.
Yeah, I would say you can confront them definitely, but I was always going to lie to protect what made me feel good. But I would always say trust your gut, because 99% of the time my mother was right when she was confronting me about it. But I did everything in my power to lie, manipulate, and spin and twist the situation to make her feel crazy and wrong. So if that's the feeling you're getting and that's the response you're getting from your loved one, you're probably right. And then my next, I think you would agree, to to go to the meetings my mother spoke about, Al-Anon, Family Restored, Learn to Cope. Those are like I know from my mother, I can speak this just because we've had this conversation, for me as well, my thing was connecting with another drug addict or alcoholic who had gotten better. For my mother, it was being able to talk to another parent who had been through what she was going through, really helped her. So I think that.
It would also be the primary care, right? When you want to bring your child into the primary care office, get to the pediatrician. I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Catherine, but you told me one time, she was getting ready to take Billy to treatment. He's, Mom, I'm ready to do this. Let me just get ready to go. And I gotta take a shower, clean up, and I'm ready to go. And Billy went to take a shower, and 10 minutes goes by, 15 minutes. And Billy would tell you he was using in his own bathroom at his own parents' home one last time to get that boot up because he was scared. He was probably scared what was on the other side. And despite all the family structure and support, it was still affecting you and gripping you that way, pulling you the other side. So you explained, Catherine, that you were naive in that sense. You trust blindly. But if the hair in the back of your neck stands up and those instincts kick in, reach out to someone. Reach out to one of us. Reach out to any of these. We now have community pillars in this community that can help. Please reach out to us.
A lot of times I tell parents, if you're having an issue and you hadn't addressed it before, find somebody in the community, like you said. A lot of parents reach out to me and I have those uncomfortable conversations. I really don't have an issue asking straightforward. Sometimes parents, it's almost like you're the worst enemy, right? Sometimes the outside help are the first ones to come and address the issue. So definitely don't wait, as you can see. My mother had no idea till the day she passed. She had no idea, or she might have. She just didn't know what to do with it at the time.
Great, thank you for the question.
Hello, my question is mostly for Billy and possibly Mom. So I've been working in the field for the last 15 years, but recently I'm working with kids. So my question to you, Billy, is you said you did the therapy, you did the counseling. Looking back, when you were a kid, is there anything you can think of that you wish was in place, or you needed and you didn't know was there, or like a complete, something you could make up? Like, what do you wish, or is there anything that you wish was in place that could have, possibly prevented any further use?
For me personally, I guess early on, it was really tough for me to listen early on to anybody. At a young age, I thought I knew everything. They couldn't tell me nothing. I had a mentality that I could do whatever. But I went to my first rehab at 19, so I was still very young. And the reason I went back is because I connected with someone who had been a drug addict and gotten better. So maybe if that was involved in the counseling or in the program, even at a younger age, that was the seed that was planted for me, right? And it was nothing against the counselors or the therapists or the people, the doctors trying to help me. It's nothing against them at all. They were doing everything they could. I just knew they didn't really know, if that makes sense. They had never been in my shoes. And I could read through it. I thought they were, again, I don't want to sound wrong when I say this. I thought they were full of, you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And they're not. They're just doing their job. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. But when I sat down with someone who had been in my shoes and had gotten better, I couldn't BS them. They saw right through mine, and I connected with them. And I wasn't successful when I went to, I had to go to rehab several times and all that, but what drew me back was that person that I connected with. So I guess if there was someone that would be willing to come volunteer at these therapy sessions or wherever you're working that's been in recovery, that's been there, that could be a huge help. Because that was the key for me. That's what drew me back. When I finally was beaten down enough and had enough, that's what drew me back to go get help. So does that answer your question? Cool, yeah. Yeah,
Back on
absolutely.
that. So I can attest to what Billy says, that nobody listens to me necessarily. I'm there for people who are seeking help, and I can help them get better in only certain ways. So I have a lot of limitations in what I can do, but I have found, we have sort of an arsenal of therapists, psychiatry, but it seems like the most effective treatment, so to say, in this case, is our recovery coaches. People in recovery who are able to sit down with others, and they can relate to, and they listen to each other. I think when to answer the previous question, obviously when you suspect substance use disorder, the first emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and it's easy to respond that way. I think it's extremely important to not shame, not even to set, make ultimatums, because that doesn't work with any young person anyway. It's not going to work with somebody who's struggling with substances, anybody who is struggling, with their mental health at all. So just trying to talk, trying to connect them is the kind of common thread here.
Thank you, James.
Just real quick too, I'll be quick. And age was a big thing too. Like a younger male figure, I could connect with that versus some older gentleman or even something like that. That was a big key to me. So even trying to connect even on that level too was really important. So,
I'd like to thank the panel. My name is Susan Smith. I'm a licensed addiction therapist, and I've worked in the field for over 30 years. And the panel was amazing. You spoke to the disease, you spoke to recovery, and I'd like to echo what the nurse said. Most people that suffer from substance use disorder have an underlying mental health issue, and there's also a stigma against that because people think mental illness is something different than what it really is. And in my experience, most people have untreated mental illness and trauma, which leads them to medicate themselves and soothe themselves with alcohol and drugs. And the one thing that we did hear was it's a disease of denial. It's cutting, it's baffling, it's insidious, and parents try to figure it out. Professionals try to figure it out, and we don't always have the answers. My experience is what Billy talked about. When somebody can identify with another person that has had the same experiences, they seem to have better results. They don't listen to their parents. I'm a parent of addicts, I know. They don't listen to their parents, what their parents know. I mean, these kids are so little and young here. I wouldn't be listening to me either if I was 13, looking up what do older people know. And I just think the panel really encompassed a big portion. And I was on the Saugus Drug Task Force years ago, and I commend the community for opening up, because most communities deny they have a problem. And this is the worst. I've worked in the field 33 years. This is the worst time that I've ever seen. And what the school nurse also said was about marijuana and gummy bears. The kids are really doing a lot more of that because it's accessible. You can get them anywhere. You don't even know. Most parents don't even know. It's really easy to hide. So I would tell parents, the kids probably aren't going to like this, but pay attention to that. Because that seems to be in the mindset of an adolescent. We heard the brains aren't developed, right? It's legal, it's okay, I can do it. So I think it's wonderful that you're opening this up, and I'm happy to be here. I just moved to Swampscott, and I have a private practice, and I am networking because there's a need for people to get the help they need. So thank you very much.
Billy or Catherine, question for you. Did anything ever go missing in your home when Billy was using? And I'm asking, what can parents look for if they're starting to suspect that, because people do become so desperate?
So when I was really concerned, I would be going into Billy's room when he wasn't there and looking in his drawers to see if there were razor blades or anything that would be sharp to cut up pills. so that he could snort them. I was checking what went missing. Jewelry went missing. Jewelry went missing, and that was devastating. Because it's a really bad place to be in, thinking your son stole from you. And did you take my book? I didn't. Oh, I didn't know I did that. It was really, really bad time. It was a really bad time emotionally in our house, trying to figure out how to, who to talk to. I couldn't talk to anybody because at that time too, again, the opiate crisis was very new, and I didn't know anybody else who was experiencing it. And it's so funny, I think back, my daughter, she's, when she was really, really young, a little girl, she got diagnosed with diabetes. And when she got diagnosed with diabetes, everybody from the whole town was so helpful and approaching to me and warm and trying to be helpful. And this is a very small town, and I know people knew that Billy was struggling with drugs. And I would go to the grocery store and I'd walk in and I'd see people that I know, and it was amazing just because they didn't know what to do for me, like where I got such support from somebody when my daughter was diabetic. It wasn't thought of in the same respect. They would look at me and like go the other way. And it was probably because they didn't know what to say, but it was just, again, it was and I didn't honestly care. I didn't care if they judged me. I didn't want them to judge my son. So it was a really tough time in our house.
It's a great point you bring.
In regards to things missing, if valuable things that can be pawned or make money are missing in your house, then you got a big issue going on at that point. That was well into the depths of my addiction when I started. And again, those were lines I said I would never cross. I'd never steal from my mother. I'd never do this. I'd never do that. If the jewelry and stuff was starting to go missing, it's not because you misplaced it. Again, trust. My mom was right 99% of the time with her instinct. I just manipulated her, made her, twisted it so she seemed crazy or like she was wrong. So, but she was 99% of the time right.
One more question.
I want to thank the panel for coming and being so honest with their stories. It's very, very appreciated by all of us. So thank you very much. One question or comment I have is I find it incredibly frustrating that community, society has the misconception that marijuana is not addictive, which is why I think it's so hard to get to penetrate teenagers when they see billboards and ads and delivered to your house for free and legalization, but nobody's talking about, substance use disorder with marijuana and what the symptoms are and what the side effects are, and that it can lead to psychosis and other problems. And I wonder, as a community, how do we educate everybody, parents down, because I think many people don't understand that it's addictive.
To add on to that, I think one of the other misconceptions is now that it's legal, kids think that it's safe. And it's the same thing with like pills. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm working on the psych board is I love admissions. I love finding out about people, kind of what brought them in there, the story that got them there. And one of the things that we always do is like a drug test. I do a urine drug test and it comes in. And as I'm doing the admission, I'm going like, what were you using? When was the last time you used? What did you use? I'm like, and you see fentanyl all the time. And you'll ask, like, that's one of the first questions, I'm like, did you use fentanyl? And probably like 8 out of 10, like sometimes they're like, yeah, I was mixing it with this and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of times they're like, no, I wasn't using fentanyl. And, if you're not getting like weed from a dispensary and you don't know where you're getting it from, you don't know what's in it or what it was cut with. And the same thing with Coke. Like the Coke has around here, or at least I've noticed, a lot of people that were like, no, I just did some lines before, like I went to the emergency room and I like checked myself in. And I'm like, okay, well, you were also doing fentanyl, whether you realized you were doing it or not, because your Coke's probably been cut with fentanyl. So I think kids, especially like with pills, yeah, if you get it from like your mom or dad's prescription box, like it's from a pharmacy, But if you're getting it from a friend, you don't know where your friend got it from and whether it's actually what you think you're taking. So on top of just like people not thinking that like weed is addictive, or you get cyclic vomiting syndrome too from that, you get migraines from coming off of it and stuff like that. They don't realize that the quality or the, I guess, purity of what they're getting and what they're using. And fentanyl is in everything, and fentanyl is so, so dangerous. And there's been like such an uptick of ODs that we've been getting into Salem and stuff like that from not knowing what they were, or thinking that they were taking one thing, not realizing that there was fentanyl or other stuff mixed in with it.
Good. Oh, one more. I'm sensitive. It's a school night, I understand, so we will be respectful for our younger kids with school.
How do you know if someone's addicted?
James, would you ever be able to expand on that?
So there are officially a number of criteria to meet, but basically, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically continued substance use despite negative or unwanted consequences, such as you can't stop using, you're using too much, you're doing questionable things to obtain the substance. You see it bleeding into work or family life. So there's a number of ways.
Thank you. Yeah, Chris.
So I can touch on that a little bit as far as what my brother did and our experiences with that. A lot of times he would, be in the bathroom for, maybe 20, 25 minutes at a time. Come out. You could tell him at the dinner table or whatever. He would do the head dogs, things like that. You could tell he's using. Then he would disappear again for maybe hours upon end. Come back home. He would have the same thing. So things like that, I feel like are possibly symptoms that someone's addicted. You know what I mean? Again, going off on stints for like 2-3 days, not coming home. That's not knowing where he is. Those are, at least for us, knowing something's off here that is not normal. You know what I mean? Losing a job, multiple jobs. So I think that would qualify as the things you can tell that aren't in the norm.
You will definitely know the change of pattern. If the person is living with you, the family member, you're definitely going to know the change of pattern and the way they live it.
I have a question.
For me personally with the addiction thing, how I knew I was addicted is as I started doing things I said I would never do, like repercussions and stuff like that. It didn't matter anymore. I would do whatever it took to get drugs and alcohol. So it just lines were crossed. The things I said I would never do were done. That's how I knew personally I was past the point of just using it for fun.
Okay, my question is mainly for the nurse. For the kids that were put into like emergency rooms and like they had to wait for weeks, what did they do for like all those weeks? And also, how could there like not be enough space for them? Like I feel like it's not really fair to them.
So if they're lucky, they have a room, but it depends on how full we are. So if they're there, if they're in a room there, they can watch TVs, their parents can bring them schoolwork. There are some limited games that they can play, but for the most part, you're just sitting there waiting. You're not talking to your friends a lot of times. In the emergency room, sometimes you'll have your cell phone or something like that, especially if your parent's there. If you're underage, they want you to have a parent there, if it's possible. Otherwise, they have like a one-to-one sitter with them to make sure that they're all right. And yeah, it's not fair, but it has to do with an availability thing. So they can't admit you inpatient if they don't have a bed available. So in order for that to happen, the kids inpatient need to go to, I guess, like the next thing, whether it's another program, whether it's home. But the thing is, especially for kids under the age of 18, there are so few programs out there that there's just not the space. So we even have kids in the psych ward that are there for much longer than they probably need to be because there's not a place that we can discharge them to. And we have to wait for a bed to open up in whether it's a mental, like a partial program, whether it's a drug program, whether it's an eating disorder program, we need to wait for a bed to open up to then transfer that child there, and then we can take someone out from the emergency room. So it ends up being kind of like a bottleneck effect, where there's no place for them to go, so it just kind of gets backed up. And now that causes problems too, because then kids that need help don't get help, or people aren't like, I'm not gonna take my daughter to the emergency room and have her wait there for 2 weeks for a bed, or something to that effect. Or, even it just stops people from getting help, and it's not fair, and there needs to be probably more programs started and more funding, because it is a problem.
Yes, we're gonna have you be our last one, okay? If that's okay, because it is a school night, and I know it's getting a little bit late, but just I can bring this to you, okay?
What do you do if you find out like a friend is vaping or stuff? Like how do you?
Like a classmate type deal. You can go to a trusted adult, and that, whether it's at home or whether it's in school, you can go to the school nurse, you can go to the guidance counselor, you can go to SRO. These are all people that are a safe place to talk to. If someone tells me that they're concerned about another student, I'm not gonna say who told me. I'll try to figure out a way to get that student down to talk to them, or get guidance involved, or I talk to Officer Wilson a lot. If I hear something and I'm concerned, and he'll kind of go and touch base. So if it's something that you're concerned about, or something that you know about, it's a good idea to tell, whether, like I said, a guidance counselor, a teacher, Officer Wilson, your school nurse, and then we can kind of take the steps, and we can do it anonymously, so they don't have to know that, one of their friends said something. But if you see something, you should say something.
That's a great comment to end that on. Thank you, Amanda. This is going to conclude our event this night. I hope it was helpful for you. I hope that if you have any questions, you want something further to come from this, or to build something consistently, we are all ears. And we do have some table resources if you'd like. The DA's office has provided us with some drug diversion and underage drinking pamphlets, as well as Antonio's organization with the outreach efforts that he has. Yes, you may, of course. The DA budget. You can.
I didn't want to say anything, the panelists are so courageous. To your question, Pam, about kids and the whole idea, the hustle's out of the barn. I was firmly opposed to legalization of marijuana, only because it was done in such a rush. Okay? I mean, and there was no need to do it without more research. But one thing that I can point out that's very frustrating for me in my office is that marijuana today is being marketed to kids. That's a sin. If you see any dispensaries, and I actually went into one in Denver with the district attorney in Massachusetts, and it struck me so hard. When I walked in, they had chocolate drink with THC, marijuana infused, medical, and it was called, it wasn't, it was Yahoo chocolate drink, this looked like waffle, hand cream marketed to teenage and young girls to absorb the skin, gummy bears, brownies. So the question you have to ask, and I mentioned this to members of our state legislature, why isn't that more regulated? Why are the companies, just like cigarettes in the 1930s, were marketed to kids, right? Because kids will spend money. Joe Cool, Marlboro Man. Marijuana in this country is being marketed primarily for children and young adults. And that's just something that can be regulated much better, and it's just promoting the dangers to children, and what we're all trying to talk about tonight. So next time you see a state senator or a state representative,
Do you think that's the question? Do you think that's more important than the lack of beds and the lack of help for people who are actually asking for it?
Do I?
Yeah.
Not one bit. I don't think at all. I deal with that issue. Dr. Jefferson, Prince of Salem Hospital, we probably work with quite a bit, and we offer drug diversion to people in lieu of prosecution. The average intake is about 3 hours. Dawn is like juvenile justice coordinators. We just don't have people which we have because 90% of the people we offer help to through Bridgewell, no cost to the person. If you don't have insurance, it's not a disclaimer. You get 6 months of new treatment. 6 months. We try to help with aftercare, vocational training. If somebody falls during the treatment and the clinicians at Bridgewell say they want to improve the program, we stand back, say fine. But that is a huge crisis to find beds, pediatric beds, beds for juveniles. That's just out of our control, and I don't by any means minimize it, but like I said, it takes us like 3 hours sometimes, because 90% of the people we try to help with their substance use disorder have a co-occurring mental health disorder. So it's a constant struggle with that. But there's no need to market marijuana to kids.
Thank you. Dee Bledge, could I come forward for a moment, please, if you don't mind? Ted, we're grateful for this content that you are dedicating and providing to this county. And as you may know, DA Blodgett has been our county's prosecutor for the last 20 years, and he is going to retire at the end of his term this year. And so as a result, the Swampscott Police Association would like to recognize your commitment to our community, and with complete gratitude and respect and thanks, we have a small token of our appreciation. This is Ted Brown. I can't thank you enough. Again, on this short notice, we put this together quickly. You came out, and I'm inspired. And this is your police department. This is what we're doing. We are here to work with you, for you, with you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Don't hesitate to call us, and we will do whatever we can to help be a resource. So thank you for your time, everyone.